Hi, I'm Steve Plaich, and I'll be your host for this episode of The Conversation Continues. The Conversation Continues is a discussion really about the issues of the day with people who are really working in the community to make it a better community, but also kind of to engage in what we have going on here in Santa Cruz County. I'm really pleased to have for this discussion with me a good friend, Joe Williams. Joe, welcome.
Thank you, Steve.
Joe is a candidate for the 20th Congressional District. For those who don't know, that's about 800,000 people. It's comprised of Santa Cruz County, Monterey, San Benito, and a little teeny bit of Santa Clara County, so people get kind of the flavor of what the Congressional District looks like. It was Sam Farr's seat for a long period of time, and now Sam very recently decided he wasn't going to run again, which really has created an opportunity for Jimmy Panetta, as you know, to kind of step in. And we were talking about how he's gotten the bulk of the media coverage, but people should know that you're not currently yet on the ballot. You're still working to place your name on the ballot.
Correct. I believe the 15th is when you actually officially declare your candidacy through the elections department.
Right.
Until then, nothing's official, and then that starts the official signature gathering, money raising,
Right.
etc.
And at the moment you're getting signatures gathered and also have a GoFundMe so people can make a contribution to kind of get yourself to the level of where you can pay that fee and or do the in lieu signatures and actually get on the ballot and be a candidate for peace and freedom.
Correct. I mean, that's the first step, is to actually achieve ballot access. And with the current rules in place, you can either pay a filing fee, which is $1,740, or gather 3,000 signatures, which is a percentage of the registered voters in the district. So it's one or the other. Every signature counts as 58 cents towards that filing fee. But I'd like to raise the filing fee. It seems to be the quickest way to do it, and that's why the GoFundMe account is in place.
And we're talking,
I'm almost halfway there.
Oh, good for you.
Just
okay,
shy of
well,
halfway,
and you can certainly encourage people to go to the GoFundMe. They have some runners on our graphics here about your phone number, your Facebook page, and things like that. So we encourage people to take a look at that and take a look at Joe Williams, who, as we were talking before the show, I was kind of talking about what issues are important, but seemingly to you more important is what the Peace and Freedom Party stands for, and how important it is to get back to kind of a socialist view of government and socialist candidates, for instance, Bernie Sanders raising the level of kind of socialist awareness. Tell us more about that.
Well, there's a few issues that come up. Maybe we should start with why I decided to run.
Please.
So I ran against Sam Farr in 2004 on the Peace and Freedom Party ballot, which was an experience, and it kind of gave me the impetus to try it again upon his retirement. As you mentioned, Sam Farr's retiring. It created a kind of a void, and there was a lot of speculation about who would run. I, like other people, kind of waited to see who was going to step up, right? So I heard all these names come through the pike.
Bill Monty, Louis
Alejo, and I'm going like, I love Monty, and I love Louis Alejo. I mean, they're the kind of Democrats I can support. And then out of left field, here comes Panetta, and the Panetta name just scared off what I would consider more worthy Democrats for the office.
No question in my mind.
So him and I have the exact same amount of elected experience. So I'm saying, well, okay, what makes this guy more qualified than I to run? And in the absence of any, what I consider more worthy Democrats, I decided that the coronation of Panetta should not go unopposed, let's say. So Peace and Freedom Party already has ballot access. They have a very well written platform that I can talk about and can argue argue positions from. So I decided to do it again, basically only because there was nobody else in the race. I mean, the media is covering Panetta, they're covering the Republican, Casey Lucius, there's a couple of other independents, and that's kind of it. Sam Farr's progressive credentials are pretty good. Even though I ran against him, I have my issues with Sam Farr, he's pretty good and heads and tails above anything Panetta could come up with, in my opinion. So this district deserves a very strong progressive voice. I don't think Panetta is it. I'm in the race to provide that alternative to people.
And we are a progressive community in my mind, and I think we should have progressive representation and leadership. This program really, in a in part was in response to a program that we'd done earlier on CTV, where Lou Tuasto is one of the board members, I think he's still on the board, but does an interview show and had Jimmy Panetta on. And he spent an hour with Jimmy talking about Jimmy and his background, and there seemed to be no other coverage of anybody but Jimmy Panetta. And so it was almost as if Sam had waited until a certain period of time to where any other qualified Democrats would, as you say, seriously consider whether or not they wanted to get in at all, and then Jimmy Panetta almost becomes the anointed candidate.
He is the anointed candidate.
Yeah.
I mean, barring the unforeseen, he will probably be elected to run this district and probably will be in office for the next 20, 25 years until he retires, like
And
Sam.
also, and as you mentioned, neither you nor he have ever held elective office.
Right.
You know?
Technically, we've both held a similar elected office, which is chair of our respective parties' central committees.
Yeah.
So that's the extent of our elected
So
experience.
we're talking about the Peace and Freedom Party and talking about socialist values and philosophy. Kind of contrast Democratic Party and what Jimmy Panetta is really putting forward, what he's offering people, and what the Peace and Freedom Party and Joe Williams is offering them.
Okay, Panetta, if you go to Panetta's website, you'll look long and hard for a platform, a policy statement, a personal opinion about anything. He's really banking on his name. And that's all he has to do. Basically, he has to keep his mouth shut till the election, not say anything stupid. He's a shoo-in, right? So I understand the campaign strategy, but I think this district deserves better. We have issues that we need to confront. Bernie Sanders has brought up a lot of issues, at least on the national stage, and if Bernie gets elected, he's going to need allies in Congress. So Bernie Sanders' campaign is another impetus for my running as well. He doesn't like establishment Democrats. If anything, Leon Panetta, Jimmy Panetta, they're establishment Democrats.
No question about it.
Barring the unforeseen, he hasn't made any statements yet, I assume Panetta will wind up endorsing Clinton. They're family friends.
Yeah.
They're family friends. So I want to step outside of that particular scenario and support the grassroots political revolution of Bernie Sanders up to a point where we agree it's completely 100% on the domestic policy. Education, covered. Healthcare, covered. People before profit, basically.
Right.
You know, this crony capitalism, casino capitalism, whatever you want to call it, it's not working for America. So the differences, I think, between Sanders and myself are in the areas of foreign policy. He likes Obama's foreign policy. I don't like Obama's foreign policy at all. So I would consider myself an anti-war candidate, really, ultimately.
Speaking of as someone who has supported veterans' rights for a long, long period of time, you know whereof you speak.
Correct. My work in that area and in Santa Cruz has entailed about 15 years worth of work as a counselor for the GI Rights Hotline, where we counsel enlisted service members who are having problems of one kind or another with the military or their family members who call. They're usually in distress, something the military is doing to either them or their family member that they're calling about, and they need advice about. So I hear the stories, and I know what the ground level situation is for our enlisted people overseas and what their reality is inside the military. So that informs my work too when I go into schools. I'm available to go into schools, and I have done this quite a bit to do truth in recruitment work. So I go in, and hopefully after recruiters have been there, I can come in and give the other side of the story about what the reality of military life is like.
And before we get into that even a little bit more,
Sure.
do you have some numbers or some contact information for people that could be involved or at least support this work?
That work is done through the Resource Center for Nonviolence.
Okay, good.
So
yeah.
Of
which we're all familiar.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope our viewers are familiar with the Resource Center for Nonviolence. Call them. They'll be happy to put them in touch with myself. And it's not just me. We have a team of counselors available to handle those kinds of requests. So call the Resource Center if you want to find out more information about that. Or you want a presentation in your school if you're a teacher.
Yeah.
Please contact us.
We were talking, of course, part of your executive committee for your candidacy is Micah Marine Smith, a long-time activist and longtime socialist, in fact, in Santa Cruz. You were talking about having been on the ballot in 2004 in Sam Farr, and as a Peace and Freedom candidate, and kind of the importance, I think, of Peace and Freedom candidates, Peace and Freedom social philosophy, to get some airing, to get some viewing, to get some people to understand that. Tell us a little bit more about how important that is and what that would entail.
Well, again, if you look at Panetta's website, you don't have anything to argue against.
It's fair to contrast, I think.
You don't have anything to argue against. If will promote and defend the entire Peace and Freedom Party platform.
Right.
If you go to peaceandfreedom.org and look for the platform, that's essentially my platform. Anybody wants to argue that or have a debate about that, it's straight bottom-up socialism. I just want to clarify the school of socialism that I'm from.
Please,
it's from the bottom-up school. There's two schools in my view. There's an authoritarian view, which is like the state seizes the means of production on behalf of the people. I'm the other view. I'm okay with that. That is the goal.
Right.
But I'm for the bottom-up. That means the trade unions take over the workplaces and do it democratically. So in any form of people power, let's say I'm on the side of the people. I don't want government to come in and step in and do it in place. I think kind of what Bernie's talking about is you need the people, and they're the ones who are going to make the change, and that's what the Peace and Freedom Party is all about as well.
And again, we're talking about your history with the labor unions. And so you know there also, wherever you speak, because you've had and continue to have experience working with labor.
Correct. I'm currently a union steward for SEIU UHW, which is United Healthcare West. And we're always in contract negotiations.
Yeah.
We're always having to maybe take strike votes, things like that. Our contracts are up every 2 years. As a steward, you're intimately involved with that process. Right. I also represent and defend people when disciplinary actions happen. I'm also an appointed delegate for SEIU UHW on the Monterey Bay Central Labor Council.
Right.
So whenever, basically represent SEIU's positions when need be, if we have something we need, sort of like a strike authorization, things like that.
All admirable qualities in somebody who would be a candidate for a congressional seat, which
thank you for saying so.
Certainly something that your hard work is now putting you in a position to at least get people to consider you for that position, and I think that is terrific. Compare a little bit, if you will, kind of the socialism that Peace and Freedom Party brings on their platform and the Bernie Sanders style of socialism.
Well, okay, controversial a little bit. There's some socialists who support Bernie Sanders and there's some socialists who don't. I am, I guess, one of those socialists who offers critical support. I am, as stated previously, I'm 100% in alignment with his domestic policy. I have major issues with his foreign policy. And I think if you look at most socialist parties, they're going to have an issue with his foreign policy. Traditionally, socialists have been anti-imperialist, which is like, we don't invade other countries. We don't station troops in foreign countries forever. We're in like 156 to 170 countries stationed right now. Wrong. So Bernie seems to accept that state of affairs, and maybe it's, you know, rightly or wrongly, maybe he'll change, maybe it's what he has to say to get elected, but that is my major area of disagreement with him. He seems to support Obama's drone program. He seems to want to, like, okay, the war against ISIS, he has things to say about that. So I have issues with that. On the other hand, if he achieves some level of people power and he is listening to the people, I think people in this country are anti-war. We've seen, what, 14, 15 years now of just an endless quagmire overseas in the Middle East with nothing being proposed, including by Panetta and the Republican candidate for Congress here, of more of the same. She wants to, the Republican wants to send more troops, more boots on the ground. You know, there's other things, oh, we should let the people in the area fight on our behalf. We should just supply material. We haven't been doing anything right in those situations. So that's my main area of disagreement.
And in terms of your own background, you've been involved in anti-war activism for a long period of time.
Long period
And
of time.
so you're able to speak knowledgeably and with an informed opinion about the things that you would bring to a congressional seat and the reason why people should be considering you as a viable candidate, actually, for this particular seat.
Well, that's the, I guess, the most frustrating thing about running as a third party.
Right.
You don't get the immediate play. I'm well aware of that situation because of my 2004 campaign against Sam Farr. I think I can count on maybe two hands how many debates, forums, appearances that were joint appearances with other candidates, right? I just thought it was, for democracy, very underserved, very pathetic. Yeah. Since Sanders is in the race and has raised socialism as a viable word, I think people are looking into it. I think people would be receptive to it the more they hear about it. Again, I'm counting kind of on Bernie Sanders' coattails.
Right.
If I get on the ballot, if I defeat, all I have to do is defeat the Republican.
Right.
Right? It's top two. After the June primary, it's only two candidates advance to the general election in November. If I can beat the Republican in the primary, then I will have a lot more media attention given and can hopefully promulgate and promote some of these ideas that you're hearing here today.
Which in fact is not beyond the realm of possibility. Looking at the last several elections here in the 20th Congressional, which was transformed from what used to be the 17th Congressional, now the 20th.
Correct.
Usually the Republican candidate gets about 23, 24% of the vote, and then Sam has gotten 60-something, and the rest are kind of sprinkled through the Greens if you have someone running, or Peace and Freedom. So it is not that much of a stretch to think that a vigorous third-party candidacy, Peace and Freedom Party, if people really understanding kind of what the Bernie Sanders socialist agenda is, how compatible that is with the Peace and Freedom Party and their platform, it's entirely possible that people could say, you know what, I think this is a time for a change. This is a time we're building a future together.
Well, I'm kind of banking on that. I'm kind of taking him at his word, is that he talks about there needs to be that political revolution from below.
Right.
And along with that, you're seeing some other congressional candidates. Again, they're not getting any play. There's an interesting guy named Preston Picus who's running against Nancy Pelosi, running a pretty good campaign, taking on one of the most establishment Democrats in this country.
Former Speaker of the House.
Exactly. And I like everything he's doing. Find him on Facebook as well. So I'm a proud supporter of his campaign against Pelosi. So there's all these, little rumblings from below. Right. But we need to get on the ballot. So I'm making an appeal to Bernie Sanders supporters to fund me to get on the ballot to actually effectuate this political revolution.
Yeah, you made an interesting comment before we began the show about there's almost a cottage industry that's developing of congressional candidates who are inspired by what Bernie's doing, and so they're throwing their hats in the ring all over the country.
I hope they get more media play. Again, I think I might be one of the only people who can rattle off the name of any of them, but there's a handful of them, and they all are inspired by Sanders' call for a political revolution.
And your hope is that this media exposure at some point is going to expand to encompass third-party candidacy, viable, in my view, a third-party candidacy for Peace and Freedom. I think when people hear, I think people know you from your work with labor, your work with the veterans, your work in anti-war activities around Santa Cruz and Santa Cruz County. Certainly it would have to be a broader, you've done some work, I know, in Monterey as well. So people would have to become more familiar with you and your work, but nevertheless, I think they also need to know more about the Peace and Freedom Party. What kind of governance are we looking for when Joe Williams is in Congress and he's supporting President Bernie Sanders? What kind of programs are we looking for that people are going to say, you know what, I want to cast a vote for that now because I want that to be part of my future?
The simple answer is Sam Farr on steroids. Or, Bernie Sanders on steroids.
Yeah.
It's like, people should go to the peaceandfreedom.org website and look at that platform. If you want somebody to champion those things, that's the kind of governance you get. Peace and Freedom Party has been on the ballot since 1968. It springs out of the whole 60s tumult, and when revolution was in the air back then as well.
Right. Yeah.
It comes out of the anti-war movement, it comes out of the radical movement. I think that is another positive thing, that there is a tradition of like what happened in the 60s. You either support what happened in the 60s or you don't, right? And we're trying to bring that back into public play because we've gone completely backwards since the advances of the 60s. We've had a lot of successes. All you're seeing is a retrenchment. Everything's going backwards. So I want to, peace and freedom has roots in that era, and I want to continue that legacy well into the future. And that includes, you know, maybe other states. It's like Peace and Freedom Party is only on the ballot in California. If anybody wants to put them on the ballot in other states, we stand prepared to help them do that.
And I think there is a sense of very deep satisfaction, deep dissatisfaction with the entrenched political power. You know, absolutely. And if there is any kind of a rejuvenation of that feeling in the 60s and 70s, that there is room for grassroots, you know, governance. There is room for political, you know, power to spring from the people rather than from institutions. Maybe that's something that Bernie Sanders and his campaign, which seems really emblematic of that, you know, can inspire in people again.
Well, again, I think I would not be sitting here today or be running and trying to get on the ballot were it not for Bernie Sanders. So thank you to him and his campaign for having these things brought back into the public realm for conversation. So definitely.
So you were talking about being in union negotiations, being a strong labor union supporter. How does that translate on a national level? Were you to be having a seat in Congress, what would you be doing to make sure that the labor management playing field is certainly more equalized than it is now?
100% pro-union support across the board. Blanket statement right there. Anytime there's a fight between bosses and labor, I'm on the side of labor. And I think that's a reflection of my socialism. It's got to do with bottom up from the people. Specifically, interesting you bring that up, AFL-CIO has a questionnaire they send out to all federal candidates, 10, 12 pages worth of questions. I answered yes to everything. So that'll give you an idea of like what my voting would look like in the House of Representatives.
But is that also in line with the Peace and Freedom Party platform?
Very pro-union. Very 100% pro-union. Exactly.
And on issues like single-payer health insurance, you know, the kind of the social issues that certainly people watching this program and that will watch this program in the future and will be casting their votes not only in June in the primary but in November are concerned about.
Again, being a healthcare professional, I mean, that's my field. I get to look at things like what SEIU is doing. So I look at what the grassroots is doing, and I look at the national stage too, at least as far as what labor is doing. So SEIU has done a bunch of good things that I've been happy to be involved in. We did a big rally for Medicare for All in Sacramento, which I attended, helped promote. We are on the side of the fight for 15 to raise the minimum wage, things like that. That kind of grassroots tumult, that all is going to come from the bottom. That's not going to be somebody going, oh yeah, here dispensing favors from above. Those are gains that have traditionally throughout history have been fought for. And eternal vigilance, right? Those need to be continued to fought for. Even when they've been gained, you turn around and lose your attention for half a second, they're going to take it away. So a strong labor movement in this country is imperative for a fully functioning democracy.
And in terms of, you've done so much work for veterans and Veterans Affairs and GIs and whatnot. Do you think we can do a better job with veterans benefits, veterans housing, veterans support post-service?
Oh, good Lord, yes. I would just talk to any veteran and ask, you know, how they've been treated after they've left the military. And I think you just find tragedy after tragedy as far as is PTSD being dealt with correctly? No. Even Agent Orange, going back to the Vietnam War, is that being dealt with correctly? No. Completely swept under the carpet.
Interesting.
Exactly. So things like that. They're discharging people who've gotten like the traumatic brain injuries from the IED roadside bombs and things like that. They wind up discharging them with personality disorders. Therefore, they don't get benefits. They are released back into the general population saying, you have a personality disorder, has nothing to do with the injuries you sustained while in combat deployment overseas, and you are now back in our general population with no help whatsoever. a tragedy, and that it should not be done. Agreeing with Bernie on that, if we're going to like send people to war, we better take care of them when we come back. I take that one step further. I don't think we should be sending people into these situations at all.
Yeah.
And my phrase is like, I'm no more veterans. If we're not going to take care of veterans, we shouldn't be creating veterans.
That's interesting you say that. My friend Mel Nunes, whose name I'll mention, he's talking about how do you solve veterans homelessness. So will you house all the veterans we have now and don't make any
Don't
more?
make any more.
No. Joe, we've got about a minute left.
Okay.
Certainly your passion, your commitment shines through here in this brief time that we have, and you are someone that people should seriously take a look at in terms of candidacy for the 20th Congressional. But you've got a minute. Tell us something we can take away from it with this.
Well, I think the takeaway is you're going to need to demand that I be included in some of the forums and debates and actually get some more coverage. I've had exactly 2 mentions, brief mentions,
Yeah.
at the end of a KSBW news story who basically said, and Joe Williams wasn't invited. That's the extent of my coverage, right?
Right.
So it's to the extent where like I'll go to news stories and various media, the Monterey Herald, the Salinas Californian, they talk about Panetta and the Republican all the time. I try to, type in, and by the way, in the comments, the comments are never approved. They never approve my comments to even just to let the general public know that I'm running. So I think the talk way outside the box in terms of what the Democrat and Republican are talking, which is same old quagmire establishment politics. 20th district voters deserve a lot better
No question.
than what they're being given with our local media.
Candidate, Peace and Freedom Party, the 20th Congressional District, someone that people should take a serious and long look at. So good luck to you.
Thank
and
you,
we'll
Steve.
see you down the road.
A pleasure.
Yeah. This has been as interesting as Joe, but we'll hope we can find somebody who's as interesting and passionate and really is a joy to have as Joe. But join us next time. This has been Steve Plachin. We'll see